let's get started. We're doing this because we need more SEO in this world, and the gatekeepers of the budgets required for that SEO, the CEOs, that C-suite, um, need to be pitched to by you. You actually need to talk their language. Otherwise, you're not going to get that golden benefit of SEO in your marketing mix. So hopefully, there's a little bit of new perspective here that you can bring to the table. I'm not going to speak much, but it's a webinar series that I'm proud to be the host of. Done over 400 webinars every 2 weeks. Please come to more. We talk about all sorts of digital marketing topics. I joined Agital 16 years ago to develop all of our marketing solutions. I was the SEO manager for the world's largest poker site. So SEO was the first service that I developed at Agital EC division, which is different from GoFish. We'll talk about that. And then Google Ads, Bing Ads, email, conversion testing, Amazon, and our strategy. Now I oversee the strategy department, and I get to do these awesome webinars with really, really smart people that I get to learn from. So Agital, GoFish, who's presenting today? Wanted to just clarify, Agital is kind of this family of agencies that are all coming together. The first one was Exclusive Concepts, the one I've been a part of for 16 years, which was the first e-commerce agency ever. And Holistic, doing 15 different channels, that's like one division. And then we brought in High Noon, REQ, we brought in WDG. And after GoFish Digital, went and won the US Search Awards 4 years in a row. And it's like, you cannot ignore these people. We wanted them to be part of the Agital family. And boy, are we lucky to have them. SEO has been changing a lot, but not everyone's changing with SEO. And GoFish has been so far ahead of the curve, doing things that no one else is really touching. I would say that they almost have no competition at all, which is really great for Agital. But what is Agital? Agital is kind of like a performance agency. Performance agencies, you tell them what channels you want to do and what your goals are. But we kind of do a little bit more than that. We like to set strategy and some strategic goals, and then do the performance marketing to hit those goals while actually measuring along the way to make sure that we're hitting holistic goals and not just channel specific goals. So we're always thinking like the C-suite across all channels. But today we're going to narrow down to thinking like the C-suite when it comes to SEO specifically. And I'm going to mute myself for a long, long time. And I'll be watching these chats and whatnot. Thank you folks for joining us. But more importantly, thank you, Chris, for joining us. It is all yours from here on out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nick, and appreciate you all having me. So yeah, my name is Chris Long. I'm the VP of Marketing at GoFish Digital. Right now, I currently head up all of our marketing efforts, our thought leadership, editorial strategy, what's GoFish Digital's marketing position in the digital ecosystem. And I also work very, very closely with our SEO product team at GoFish Digital. So throughout the past 10 years, heavily involved in consulting for everyone from small businesses all the way up to large enterprises like Geico, Adobe, New York Times, Fashion Nova, all experiences between SaaS, e-commerce, right, and advising on their SEO strategies. Also been really lucky enough to be part of some really cool events in the past. Two-time MozCon speaker. I've written for Moz, Search Engine Land, and NextWeb, and really have a lot of experience in terms of consulting on SEO strategies for clients. During this journey, one of the coolest things has been I get to have a lot of conversation with senior level marketers or CEOs about their SEO strategies, about getting buy-in for SEO, about figuring out what was the best course of action for them in their business and solving their problems, which is kind of one of the impetus for this webinar today, is just to share some of those learnings that I've been able to have throughout the past 10 years, talking to a lot of senior leaders about SEO and getting buy-in for search initiatives. Little more information about GoFish Digital. We are a division within the Agital platform. We specialize in a couple core areas. SEO obviously being one of them. Digital PR is then our link building arm. So if you're ever looking for media coverage or to gain backlinks to your website, one of the best ways is through digital PR. It's kind of a media-based approach to actually link building, content marketing, and then reputation management, design development, PPC, all things that we touch within the Go Fish Digital ecosystem, as well as things we're well versed into talking to marketing leadership about in terms of how to get these different digital initiatives instituted within a given organization. As well, Go Fish Digital, we are a trusted partner. We say we work with anyone from mid-market to enterprise clients, right? You can see some of the different companies that we've been able to work with in the past, as well as the thought leadership we've done from everything from industry blogs like Moz and Search Engine Land, all the way to more national publications like the Washington Post, NextWeb, NPR. So really proud of kind of the reach we've been able to have since we started our journey in 2005. We've also won a lot of awards in the past, right? We're a Moz recommended company. We've won 30 plus search. We've won 25 different search awards from the US Search Awards, including Best SEO Agency 4 different times, Most Innovative Paid Media Campaign, Best Use of Content Marketing. We've actually won quite a few different awards across the different offerings that we have. So really proud of those, really accomplished, and something I'm pretty attached to because these are something that I help head up every single year, and really showcasing the great work and innovative work that our team has been able to do. So let's start to get into kind of the agenda for today, because what we're going to talk about is SEO for the CEO. We're going to talk about a few different things. We'll first talk about the challenges we at SEO space. Kind of why is there a disconnect between SEO and senior marketing leadership? Next, we're going to really want to talk about like, how do CEOs or senior marketing leaders, how do they really think about SEO? Really, like, how can we really use tools that are at our disposal to really kind of understand their language? Next, we're going to talk about how we can actually use these different platforms to find that out, and even discuss how we can use things like earning reports to actually really dive deep and understand how senior marketing leadership, like what they care about in terms of digital and what they care about in terms of their financials, right? SEO is a lot more than just maybe giving kind of ad hoc recommendations. To get buy-in, especially from senior leadership, you need to know what they're all aligned around, and earnings reports can be a phenomenal way of doing that. Next, we'll talk about metrics that CEOs can understand, and this is a big one, because I think one of the biggest disconnects between SEO and senior leadership is in our metrics, right? Oftentimes, we're reporting on metrics that, maybe from the SEO side, we understand and we present on, but maybe when a senior leader takes a look at that, it requires a bit of explanation to get to, right? And that's what we want to avoid when we're talking to senior leaders about SEO. We need to be talking to them about a few key metrics. And spoiler alert, guys, a lot of it comes down to talking about revenue and profitability in terms of how you're talking about your SEO initiatives. The final thing we'll talk about will actually be forecasting. SEOs can lean on things like it depends a lot, but we need to stop that, right? Because a lot of other digital channels are basically, they're advocating for their position in the market. They're advocating for the budgets, right? And forecasting is a really big way that you're able to get budget, and a really big way you're able to actually communicate your value in terms of revenue. So that's going to be the agenda for today and kind of how we'll kind of discuss things. So with that, I think that brings us to our first poll. So I'll let Nick take it from here.
Yeah, just wanted to get a sense of like who's in the audience real quick, guys. Do you report to someone in the C-suite, like a CEO, or don't you? I mean, it's possible that you don't. And we expect there's going to be at least a few CEOs in the audience as well. We just threw that in there just in case. But what we'll do is we'll just wait until we've got a pretty good statistical group here. I'll look at you guys are answering really, really quickly. So let's close this out in 5, 4, 3, 2. Get your answer in, and let's share this. But yeah, I mean, 78% you're either the CEO or you report to the C-suite or CEO themselves. What are your thoughts on that, Chris? Is that what you were we're hoping for in terms of the content of today.
For sure, yeah, and that's what's interesting is even if you are, it's interesting to one to see that hey, 75% of people here plus, right, like report in directly into either the CEO or senior marketing leadership. So one, it's great that a lot of you already have access, like direct access to the CEO. That's because you're able to at least advocate for your position. You're able to advocate for SEO as a channel, which is a really, really powerful position to be in. Even if you're one of the people that selected no, the good news is that even if you don't, someone else does, right? Somewhere so along the line, right? Like your reports are getting shared, your progress is getting shared. It is very, very likely that even if you are not the direct person that talks to CEO, someone else in the organization is. So whether you do directly or not, these skills will still be extremely invaluable for helping you put your marketing channel, your SEO, in the best position when you're able to talk to senior leadership or CEO or the C-suite. So really, really interesting to see it, and really great to see that a lot of people seem to have that type of reach in their individual organizations. So now I think we can kind of go through and start talking about what are the problems that SEOs face when they communicate with the C-suite, right? What are a lot of the challenges that we have? Because oftentimes it's like when we think about ourselves as SEO, we want to think we're this person, right? I used ChatGPT and had it render me as the CEO, and this is what it came up with. We think we're this person when we're an SEO, right? But maybe we get on the phone with a client or a CEO in the C-suite, and we have our opportunity. And then we start to feel like this person, right? Maybe a little lazier, a little more laid back, maybe not as polished. Or even sometimes maybe we might feel completely lost, and we feel like this person, right? We're in a great opportunity to present the findings of our work, but we might not know how to do it, right? So how can we improve the way that we're actually able to talk about this? So I think there's a couple of reasons for the disconnect between SEO marketers and C-suite executives. One is just the ecosystem, the tools that we operate in, and that's what you really have to think about. Like if you're in SEO or you're in marketing, like these are the tools of your trade, right? You're in Search Console, you're in Screaming Frog, you're in Stat, you're in Moz or Ahrefs, right? You're doing technical audits in Lighthouse. You're in a very, very diverse set of tools. A lot of these are practical tools, they're database tools, they're analysis-based tools. So if you're an SEO, you're probably living in tools like Screaming Frog, right? Where it's like, hey, we have an e-commerce site and we're analyzing lots of data about the different crawl errors and issues and index tags, canonicals, duplicate headings, whatever the case might be, right? Very Screaming Frog, very technical, very tactical tool. Anyone who's an SEO practitioner is probably using that, right? You might live in terms of your reporting, you might live in terms of like visibility reports, right? So you're judging your KPIs based on like, hey, we're taking a look at like our organic visibility, and then we're measuring whether or not we're improving, right? There's one of the fundamental kind of benchmarks of success in terms of SEO is your individual visibility reports. And this is all really great stuff to be in, but what we have to understand, right, is that the CEOs and senior level marketers, they are not in these reports, right? This is not their day-to-day. If you think about the CEO, their tools of the trade, it's probably even much more stripped down, right? Less diverse across ecosystems, and less tactical too, right? Like, yeah, maybe the CEOs use sales, maybe they use a CRM like Salesforce, maybe they use an ERP. But a lot of the C-suite or senior marketers, they live in communication tools. They might be in their email for 80% of the day, or they might be creating PowerPoint decks or communicating with people via Slack or Teams. Like it's a much more communication style driven role than SEO, where we're in the day-to-day, right? And then if we think about reporting for the CEO, let's just think about that. They're not in visibility reports, right? They're not looking at those types of things. They're looking at traditional P&Ls, right? Where we're taking a look at what's our revenue, what's our cost of revenue, and what's our profit from that, right? Because that's what they're concerned about at the end of the day is the profitability of the business, the scalability of the marketing channel. They're less concerned with the individual weeds. They're not going to be using the individual tool sets that we are. So that's a big reason for the disconnect, right? Is that the CEOs and the C-suite, they're not going to have access to all the data that, a traditional SEO might. So we need to learn to account for that, right? And to figure out how can we learn to communicate with the person who looks at the P&L every day as opposed to a screaming frog report, as opposed to Google Search Console. So first now let's talk a little bit about like, how do CEOs think about SEO, right? Like, is there a way that we can kind of get into their mind about like what they're thinking about in terms of search initiatives? And the great news is there is. There's publicly available tools that we can utilize and to research, actually figure out like how CEOs are thinking about search initiatives. This is a great resource called on sec.gov called EGR. It's public filings from oftentimes publicly traded companies about their individual performance as a company. And what we know is basically in order for something to go in the EGR database, the CEO generally directly has to sign off on it, or if it's not the CEO, it's the CFO, someone high up in the organization, right? They directly have to review and then actually sign off on whether or not this is accurate and valid. But it's a great resource because this is publicly available, and we can use this to figure out like, hey, how are CEOs reporting about SEO? Like, how in these financial documents, like how are they referencing it? So what we can do is a couple of different things. One of the things we thought was interesting is like when you take a look at the data from the EGR database, the mentions of SEO are actually rising over time, which is really good because that means more CEOs are thinking about SEO than ever before. SEO is getting mentioned more by publicly traded companies, a lot more than it was back in 2018. So that's really cool data. So SEOs are becoming more aware of SEO, but it doesn't mean that they understand all the idiosyncrasies, right? All the details. So if you want, what I challenge you to do as a practice is go into the EGR database, then actually type in SEO, right? And then see what different documents come up. Here you can actually see right here that after typing in SEO, I got 6,300 different results of all different types of companies that are actually mentioning SEO in their actual reports in the EGR database. So that's really cool. Now what we can do is we can go in and we can actually analyze how are they talking about it, right? We can get these actual insights about how these CEOs are making references in the actual EGR reports. So let's just take a couple of examples, right? One interesting document we found was by Leafly. They're primarily a .com site in the cannabis industry. And they talk about it like this. They said our high quality, high search engine optimization, ranking content library attracts an audience and helps increase Leafly's brand profile across consumers, right? So they're talking about their content is basically a content library or almost in terms of assets. And here they'll help you talking about it in terms of attracting an audience and helping increasing brand profile. Here's a different one. Here's cars.com. Here, when they talk about SEO, they're talking about the SEO help drive audience market share gains to enable record organic traffic through sector leadership in SEO. Third quarter of 2019 marked the strongest quarter for both SEO and traffic and leads in the past 20 years. So here they're talking about market share, right? And we're going to get a little bit more on that later because it's a really key metric that a lot of C-suite executives will understand and can be a great way for you to communicate your value in terms of search marketing. Here's the last one, Pinterest. So Pinterest here, they're actually talking about how they diversified outside of SEO, but still very helpful. Here they talk about how they diversified growth channels outside of SEO, including more personalized notifications and sharing idea pin content on third-party platform. But here they're referring to SEO as a growth channel. So these are just some really interesting results from the EGR database on very large enterprises that are using SEO significantly in order to acquire new customers. So once we review and kind of look at things, we can think about, hey, how are CEOs referencing SEO? We're talking about it as a diversified growth channel, right? And a lot of clients we talk to, they talk about it as a growth lever for their company. So if you're looking to talk about SEO, that's a really helpful phrase to use when in front of the C-suite, is that it's a funnel, it's a channel for growth. They're talking about how they use it to grow market share, especially when compared to competitors. They're also talking about how they can use it to attract an audience. So this concept of how can we bring in a new audience? SEO is a means of doing that. We also saw examples where people talk about SEO in terms of lowering customer acquisition costs. So SEO might be an example of a large enterprise where they want to diversify outside of paid media. They say, hey, we want to have a channel that we don't necessarily have to spend more in order to get more. Well, SEO can be a really valuable way to actually lower customer acquisition costs. And then they also talk about increasing brand profile, right? How can we improve our branding, right? SEO can be a great way of doing that, especially maybe with more top of funnel content. So if you're ever in a position where you're talking to the C-suite about getting buy-in for SEO, think about using these phrases. Think about talking in terms of market share, attracting an audience, a growth channel. That's a really big piece for me. And that's been a way that's really helped in talking to a lot of C-suite executives over the years, is learning how to talk about it in these terms. It's also important to understand not only what they're talking about, but also what are they not saying in these reports, right? What are people not talking about? And a lot of times they're not talking about improving our first page rankings or driving organic traffic or optimizing crawl budget, distributing link equity, or reducing our site's 404 errors. The CEOs, the C-suite and senior level to marketers, they're not in the weeds like that. So if we start talking about them, even about things like organic traffic, they might understand it, but it might be harder for them to connect, right? Now, it's a big caveat here. I'm not saying we should never talk about these things. There is certainly a time and a place. These are all very important things in order to actually improve our SEO, right? We need to do all of these things in order to actually drive to that goal. But when we're confronted with the CMO, when we're confronted with the C-suite, they're not going to understand this language, right? So we need to convert, these types of metrics, scroll budget, eat, link equity, first page rankings. We need to convert that type of messaging into this right here and actually start talking about their own language, how they're actually referring to SEO initiatives. So let's talk a little bit about earnings reports. Earnings reports are another phenomenal way to do two things when you're communicating with the C-suite. Similar to Edgar, I would highly recommend looking at the earning reports in order to figure out, one, how is the CEO talking about SEO? Because once again, the CEO is oftentimes reviewing and helping put together these earnings reports. Two, it's also helpful for figuring out how you can align your SEO initiatives with the entire organization as a whole. So this was a great tip given I saw on LinkedIn from Tom Critchlow, where he talks about if you want to understand how CEOs think about SEO, pay attention to earning reports, right? And he actually gives a specific quote from Joey Levin of Angie, where he talked about directly in an earning report how they reference SEO. So extremely valuable resources. Similar to the Edgar database, they're also publicly available because these are publicly traded companies, right? So you could literally go in, you could Google Walmart fourth quarter earning reports, and you could get all of that information right here, right? You get Walmart, you can get Nike's, and here you can you can see all the key initiatives they're working on, what they're up and down in terms of revenue. You can look and see if they're talking about their digital marketing strategies in these earning reports. But maybe even more importantly than how they reference SEO in these, you can start to look and see, what do they care about from a growth perspective to their company, right? What products are fueling growth? What services are fueling growth? What areas do they think they have a competitive advantage in? And then you can learn to frame your SEO initiatives around the things that senior leadership actually cares about. So next, we'll talk a little bit about the metrics that CEOs understand, right? We talked a little bit before about, we in SEO use a lot of metrics like crawl budget and 301 redirects and 404 errors. But unfortunately, CEOs, they don't understand these metrics, right? What are the metrics that CEOs are actually going to care about in terms of SEO, right? There's a few different ones that I think when you're talking to a C-suite marketer that can really help connect with them. One of my favorites is market share. Market share is absolutely phenomenal, right? A very simple example is the percent of total sales in an industry generated by a particular company. Any C-suite marketer is going to instantly understand the concept of market share. So if you can convert talking about this in terms of SEO, it's really going to hit home with them. This is absolutely one of my favorite reports in a tool called Ahrefs. You can actually get a competitor market share report. So you can see here, if we were working with this site in blue, we might plug this site in and then say, hey, we're going to plug 3 other competitors in. And now we can directly see what's the search market share of our site versus the search market share of the company in red, the company in orange, and the company in green. Now we have a direct visualization of competitor market share, and we can visualize that to a C-suite executive. So if you show this type of slide to a C-suite, it's immediately going to get their attention. And here in this example, it doesn't take a lot of calculation to understand that, hey, in terms of search market share, we're lacking behind competitors. they're getting more traffic and they're getting higher traffic conversion. They're getting traffic with higher value. Where do we need to catch up? And how can we close the gap in terms of that market share? As well, in this Ahrefs report, it also actually breaks down like a share percentage too. So if you want to actually provide even more data to this, you could say, hey, we have an e-bike website, but Rad Power Bikes over here, they have 26% of the market share. And in Benton, they have 25% of market share, right? Where, hey, we're maybe only at 10% of search market share. Extremely powerful report, extremely useful in terms of how you can actually present this type of market share to senior level marketers. The next is talking about things in terms of a content library, right? CEOs, they might not understand, even maybe they might understand the concept of content marketing or why content creation is powerful. I really like talking about things in terms of content library or competitor content velocity. So this is another powerful report in Ahrefs or whatever organic channel you want to use. Visualizations really tend to help. So if you are saying, hey, we want to launch a new content initiative, you might say, hey, we compared our site in blue against a competitor's site, and we can see that in the past 2 years, they've doubled their content library. It's giving them twice the number of opportunities to actually get valuable traffic that drives revenue to the site. We need to be building up our content library at the same rate as competitors. So another great way of talking to kind of the CEOs is talking in terms of this content library. And this is a great Ahrefs report where you can actually visualize, hey, what type of content library does a competitor have? What type of content library do we have? And we can compare the two. And this works in all industries. This works if you're in e-commerce, you could compare competitor category and product pages versus your site. If you're in B2B SaaS, you could compare how many pages they have around really core topics that you want to compete in for B2B. Very powerful report. And another note, anytime you can visualize something for a senior marketing leader or the CEO, it's going to make it much more impactful, right? It's going to make it much easier for them to get from point A to point B and have to explain 50 different caveats down the line. So Ahrefs, a great, phenomenal tool for doing that. Something else that we know a lot of CEOs care about
Chris,
is
really quickly, for the last few reports, were they all Ahrefs?
Yes, correct. These are
Yeah.
both Ahrefs. If you use tools like a SEMrush, I believe has a similar market share type of tool that you can visualize that. And I believe you can also with SEMrush get like how many pages competitors are building. Oftentimes different SEO tools will have their version of this. If you don't have this, you can often replicate it in your SEO tool of choice.
Thank you.
Cool. A final metric that we know a lot of CEOs, a lot of senior marketing leaders have really been asking us more and more about is AI, right? Like how are we using AI in our SEO strategies? Once again, another visualization is really key for this. This is actually a proprietary tool that we've built, but this is actually a tool that will take any piece of content on the site, we'll compare it to the query that you want to rank for, and then section by section, we'll analyze and visualize how optimized is that piece of content for the given query, right? Even if you don't have this tool, being able to kind of overlay this directly for a CEO or C-suite, preferably using AI is really, really powerful. So if you want more information on kind of how to use this tool, we're happy to chat. But this is another really strong way is to really talk to the CEO about, hey, how are we using AI in our search strategy? And really also, can we visualize how we're using that, right? Especially in terms of our content optimization. So if you're talking about content optimization in using this type of report, it becomes a little bit nebulous. Now you can start to show the CEO actual values. Hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how optimized is our heading? How optimized is our first paragraph? Really, really helpful to be able to do and show a strong kind of case to the CEO about maybe something more tactical like an on-page optimization. And the final piece in terms of metrics that CEOs care about, right? When everything else fails, one of the things that CEOs care the most about is profitability of the business. If we go all the way back to that one of the first slides we showed, they're looking at P&Ls, right? Like that is their metric of success. Is the business growing or is it failing? There is very few metrics that CEOs care more about than profitability of the business. which means that in SEO, we need to be talking about our recommendations in terms of that. Now, that can be challenging because if you're running a link building campaign or doing a technical SEO initiative, there's not always a clear path to how that impacts profitability. So this is a really good shortcut and can change the way that you talk about senior marketing leaders. The key is to always funnel your recommendations down to how they impact profitability at the end of the day. So let's say we had a recommendation to create authoritative content at the very top. That might be harder to get to profitability just in terms of that. So we might want to say, hey, well, first we want to create 10 pieces of authoritative content. And then by doing that, we're going to improve rankings by 20% for purchase intent queries. Now, knowing your conversion rate on your site, we expect that's probably going to drive 200 additional organic leads. Once we can back into how much an individual lead costs and what the margin on that cost is, we can yield $10,000 in positive ROI. That's a much better way of talking about an authoritative content initiative than, hey, we're going to create a bunch of authoritative content on your site and we're going to create 20 different pages. CEO or marketing leaders, they might say, well, that's great, but what does that mean? Always funneling your recommendations down to revenue, right? So even if you're doing a structured data initiative, it's, hey, we're going to implement this collection page structured data on your purchase intent pages. This is expected to have a 5% organic lift across all of the category pages on your site. We believe that by doing this, that's going to yield this percentage in actual e-commerce sales for the business, right? Now we just took something that's a structured data recommendation, much more nebulous, but we build it down to actual how it's going to impact profitability at the end of the day. So if I could give you one piece of advice, right, it's constantly think about, hey, when I'm giving a recommendation and I'm giving it to the CEO, how do I think it's going to impact profitability? Because that's the way you need to talk about. And we'll talk about a little bit more about forecasting later. I think it's something that SEOs are a little afraid to touch on. We'll talk about a little bit how you can actually get into these numbers and actually forecast different values. So with that, I believe that brings us to the second poll of the day.
Yeah, and well, we're not going to run any more polls in this. We just wanted to see if, especially for businesses or individuals here who are not, part of an SEO agency, which, very welcome to have you here. And just actually a quick reminder on that point, if you're part of an SEO agency and you get a lead that you think is a little too big for what you guys are doing at the moment, please send them over our way. I'll put my email address in. You can always write to me directly and I can navigate with Chris and we can figure things out. But we have to also reject maybe 80% of people who want to work with us because they're not the right size. So we can always give you some leads back. We're happy to do that. But if you're not an agency, we would love to know whether you have a website that you might want us to run an SEO audit for. And get our take, our analysis, but even our narration on what it means in terms of what we're seeing when it comes to market share metrics. The way you're approaching content right now. We have a few proprietary tools, including one that people are asking about, like what is that tool? There's some proprietary technology in Agital that we'd like to also run to see what's going on. And also look into the competitive landscape for you to see how you're doing. This may start to shape either a strategy, a way to talk to your CEO, and hopefully a partnership. So, but if you're just curious, you have some questions, do just go to maybe I need more information. Honestly, whatever question you have, even if the question is, am I the right size for you? Happy to take those questions and start a conversation. So we'll take another 5, 4, 3, 2, and we're going to continue on with the presentation. Roughly half of you asked for some next steps, which is pretty awesome. We're going to be busy, so thank you. Looking forward to that.
Cool. So now let's talk a little bit about like more practical examples, right? So like how can you actually connect? How can you actually use kind of some of the things that we've talked about to connect your SEO recommendations to things that a CEO is really going to care about, right? What are some practical ways that we can do that using some of the things that we touched upon, using investor reports, using market share data? Kind of how does that look, right? So let's just say, for example, that we were trying to get buy-in for an SEO initiative that we were working with Walmart on, right? How will we go about that? Well, maybe our first recommendation where we took a look at our strategy and we had some internal meetings and we said, hey, we want to create more category and product pages so you can get indexed by Google, right? That's our recommendation from an SEO perspective. Nothing wrong with this recommendation. We know that maybe Walmart's a big e-commerce site and that they would probably benefit from more category e-commerce pages. But maybe we want to make that a little more strategic, right? Like, how could we take this and turn it into something that might get a little more buy-in from C-suite executives? So first, maybe we take a look at their investor reports, right? We say, hey, we want to understand, like, what does Walmart care about? Like, right? What are they reporting on their individual investment reports? What do they think are the biggest growth areas of their business? How can we seek to understand that a little bit more? So we take a look and we say, hey, like when we take a look, it looks like they're talking about grocery a lot, right? They first bullet point highlighted here, they talk about share gains in grocery and general merchandise. Third bullet point here, they're talking about sales strength led by grocery and health and wellness. So first, they seem to be really focusing on kind of the grocery sector of their business. So now we start to understand, like, hey, senior leadership is bought into this growth strategy. Maybe we can find a way to pivot there, right? Maybe we need to angle our SEO recommendations a little bit to talk about how can we support the organization? How can we go with the Walmart organization? So maybe we take it back to our Ahrefs market share report. We say, hey, we're going to take a look at Walmart's site in the top, and then we're going to compare it to Kroger and Costco and Albertsons, these really big grocery chains. Now what we can do is we can start to form market share reports. So now we have a direct comparison of Walmart's market share, kind of obscured in the blue on the very left there. And now we immediately see, hey, who are the big players, the big dogs in terms of, the grocery, in terms of visibility? Well, it's Costco and Kroger, right? So now we have a much better idea of who our core competitors are, and we've segmented this down to really product lines that like a CEO or a C-suite of Walmart could better understand. So now we're going to take that initial strategy and we're going to say, hey, you know what? We need to create a digital program to close the market share gap between Walmart and key competitors like Costco and Kroger. That's a much better, a much more CEO-friendly way of framing an SEO initiative than say, hey, we're going to create more indexable pages for you. Doing something like that is something that a CEO can really get behind. It's based on market share. It's based on competitor analysis. It's based on a growth strategy of a core business line that we know they want to optimize for. T-Mobile. Let's say we were working with T-Mobile here and we wanted to do the exact same thing, different business line. Once again, maybe we say, hey, we're looking to optimize T-Mobile's core product pages. Once again, nothing wrong with that, right? I think that's a good strategy. But if we were talking to marketing leadership, we might need to adjust it a little bit. So we might say, hey, let's go back to the investor reports. Okay, well, we did that. And let's say, okay, we see that T-Mobile, they really talk about, like, they're really proud of their 5G network coverage, right? They talk about how it covers more than 300 million people. They talk about some of the different performance that they've benchmarked, their network against key competitors, using some of these technologies. That's a really big product differentiation for them. Well, we need to be talking about that and talking about how does SEO, how does it support that product differentiation? So maybe now we go back to our keyword research tools and say, okay, I'm gonna type in 5G here. I'm just gonna see, okay, they rank pretty well for 5G home internet. Well, that's a really key product area for them. We need to talk about that in our SEO strategy. So now we can go and say, hey, for 5G internet, they have good visibility, but they're kind of the middle, the bottom of page one, but that's a really important page for them because we know based on their investment reports, based on the research that we've done, that marketing leadership is all signed off and said, we care about how we're positioned for 5G network, right? So now we can go back and say, instead of we're going to optimize pages, right? Our initiative is we want to spread digital awareness about T-Mobile's 5G network leadership, right? That's what we're going to go and that's what we can go to the CEO and talk about, right? Now we're talking a little bit less about page optimization. We're talking about marketing. We're talking about branding growth in a key sector that we know they care about. So really get comfortable with these different types of reports, everyone. They're really great tools to better understand how marketing leadership is thinking about these types of initiatives. That brings us to our last section. We're talking a little bit about SEO forecasting now. I have strong opinions on how SEOs think about forecasting. I think we've, as an industry, been really afraid to do it right, and we lean on, hey, it depends, right? Like it depends on if there's a Google algorithm change and the helpful content update, and what we don't know what Google's doing with AI. Like there's a lot of kind of there's a lot of kind of people talking about it depends in terms of SEO, which is why SEOs are afraid to give forecasts. But you know what? At the end of the day, a lot of other digital channels could do the same thing. They could talk about, hey, it depends, product could talk about inflation or competitor messaging or if a competitor cuts their pricing, right? There's all kinds of different reasons other marketing channels could use to not give a forecast, which is why I think SEOs, especially when you're talking to senior leadership, you shouldn't be afraid to forecast, right? A couple of mentalities with that, right? A couple of ways that can better help you forecast, right? One is use annualized values when you're forecasting, right? That's going to help make the number, well, it's going to make the numbers look larger, but also just put them in terms that a CEO or C-suites are going to be able to understand. Present different scenarios, right? You don't have, when you give a forecast, I think we're often afraid of like, hey, we're going to give this one forecast, and if we don't hit that number, it's viewed as a failure. Well, you know what? Present different scenarios. Present 3 different models: an optimistic model, a moderate model, and then a conservative model. And then that way you have a range to be able to work in. You can also choose different forecasting models as well. That is another really, really great way. You don't have to only use one forecasting model. There's different ways that you can present data to get different forecasting options there. Finally, tie back to revenue, right? Tie your forecast back to profit and revenue. At the end of the day, that's the one metric the CEOs are going to really look the most to influence. So that's how we're gonna talk about this in terms of these next kind of few things. So another thing I think is also important to think about is think about forecasts as a communication tool. Once again, it does not have to be the end all be all of your SEO initiatives. You can think about forecasting as a communication tool. It doesn't have to be necessarily hit this value or not. C-suite just wants to know, what are they getting for an investment, and is there a possibility for it to return an ROI? So now we're going to talk a little bit about the different forecasting models that we can actually utilize, right? There's 3 ones that I really like to use. It depends on how sophisticated you are and which one is the best fit for your organization. But there's a percentage growth goal, a market share capture, and a competitor rolling average, and they all kind of have their pros and cons. So percentage growth goal is probably the most simple, right? You're just going to say, hey, we're just going to assume within the next year that we are going to improve our organic traffic by a certain percentage, right? So let's say we have 1 million organic sessions to the site. We're going to present 3 different scenarios. One where we improve it by 15%. The second scenario, we improve it by 20%. The third scenario, we improve it by 25%. And you can back into the net organic estimated traffic values. This is really good, especially if you don't have a lot of data to go off of. It's a more simplistic approach, right? If it's your first foray into forecasting, and you're fairly confident you can hit between one of these values, right? This might be the best approach for you. The positive, it's really simplistic. The 2, it's not based on actual data, right? You're kind of essentially making a logical assumption, a forward-looking statement, if you will, of the actual like forecasted improvements that you're going to be able to get. That's the most basic one, right? But a good starting point for a lot of people. The next one is going to be what's called a market share capture. So now you're starting to base this in more actual data, right? So here, a market share capture is where you can take maybe your top competitor, your top 2 competitors in search, and do a calculation where it's like, hey, if we believe we can capture 2% of their organic traffic, what does that look like in terms of our improvements, right? Now what's nice is you're actually using actual competitor data, actual market share data to understand how much search market share is there available. So in scenario 1, we might forecast a 2% market share capture. In the second one, we forecast a 5% market share capture. In the third scenario, we forecast a 10% market share capture. So these are different ways that we can actually use existing competitor data to forecast different market share capture values. So you can once again use a tool like Ahrefs or SEMrush, pull your top competitors, and then figure out like, hey, which ones are the ones what can we pull in terms of a market share capture? The final one is the most complex. It's called a rolling competitor average. This is actually based on more actual data. What you'll do is you'll go into a tool like Ahrefs, and then what you'll do is you'll actually export the traffic growth over time. And then what you can do is you can calculate between each month. So on the right here, what percentage do they grow month over month, right? So here for the year 2020, for the past year from 2022 to 2023, we calculated out how much that competitor grew month over month, each individual month, right? And then you can back into, hey, we've got an average this number, and then you can say, hey, based on this number, we believe that their average was a 9% market share growth on average. Now we can come up with ranges between the 9%, right? Now we can say, based on actual competitor data, we saw they grew this much percent. Now we forecast our ranges based on their average 2-year, 1-year rolling average. And then, hey, here's what it looks like in terms of our market share growth. So that's a little more complex, right? But the good news is for this one is you're actually using real competitor growth data and then calculating what percentage did they grow. And then you can apply that same percentage growth to your own company. A really powerful way to be able to say, hey, this is how much competitors grew. And based on that data, we believe we have a realistic shot at growing the same way. The final aspect of this is to always, always, always translate your forecast into actual revenue. At the end of this, whatever you're doing, right, always add these like this final column, right, where you're actually translating your organic traffic into net revenue and even profitability if you can, right? So here we added 2 more columns, right, where we say, hey, if we assume a 2% conversion rate and a $100 average order value, our net revenue ends in this. If you wanted to take a step further, you could say, we know we get X margin on this, and this is how much profit we would actually realize by investing in this SEO initiative. So another great way of like actually forecasting, going from organic traffic to actual profitability, something that C-suite marketers are really, really going to care about. Something you're going to be able to, it's going to really help you get better buy-in, because now we've taken something nebulous like organic traffic, we've distilled it down to dollars and cents. At the end of the day, everyone, that's what CEOs, that's what these marketing leaders are really making an investment in, is their growth in the company. And we need to be better at communicating how we're going to be vehicles for them to achieve that growth in the company. So to sum it all up, everyone, 5 different takeaways, right, to get buy-in. 1, utilize the language of the C-suite, learn it inside and out, look at Edgar, look at investment reports, look at what people care about, right? Think about how CEOs are actually talking about SEO initiatives, and then start changing your language to reflect what they're talking about. Next is to use metrics they care about, right? The less we talk about domain authority, SOF 404 errors, technical SEO, more we're talking about market share, competitor growth, content libraries, AI, the better it's going to be, the more we're going to be able to hit home with some of these really key decision makers. Don't be afraid to forecast, right? Do not be afraid to actually put your SEO initiatives in terms of a forecast. A big reminder, a forecast is a communication tool. It does not have to be thought of as a hard and fast number that you're going to or aren't going to hit. Plenty of other marketing channels give forecasts all the time. They're not afraid to do it. SEO shouldn't be afraid to do it either. We're probably one of the best channels at actually being able to come up with forecasts based on all the data at our disposal. And the final one is always tie back to revenue. At the end of the day, a business, a CEO is judged on the revenue, on the profitability they're able to bring to it. SEO is an investment of that. The more you're able to tie back your actual initiatives to revenue, the better success you're going to have in terms of actually getting buy-in from C-suite executives. So with that, I believe we have time for some questions here. So I can go in here and answer some questions here. So Tracy asks, where would I get the right information for market share, organic traffic from competitors? That's a great question. So basically in Ahrefs, there's going to be an organic competitors tool chart. You'll just type in your domain and Ahrefs will automatically populate some different competitors. Like I said, other SEO tools will probably have this like type of feature as well. That's something that you can easily are able to do on your end. So it's like find the market share tool report and whatever your SEO tool of choice is, and then use that to forecast different scenarios. I'm just go down to this one from Jeff, and Jeff is asking about the AI slide that I talked about earlier, the AI scoring slide. How does this compare to existing SEO scoring tools like Yoast? It's more advanced than Yoast because Yoast is basically it goes to this is basically using BERT's Google BERT similarity. So it's like Google's own AI that it's using, or BERT is probably using much more of a text-based AI, or text-based like analysis. So Yoast is a little bit more simplistic, and Yoast is only going to take a look at like the page level. Like literally, this tool will take a look at section by section, right? How you can improve scoring on every single one section. Where Yoast won't tell you if like, hey, you're scoring poorly. Well, is it because your FAQs at the bottom? Is it because your top of the page content isn't optimized? This tool will actually use Google's own AI to understand how your content is actually scored.
And Chris, BERT is essentially a transformer in SEO. Like if it's for a score from like -1 to +1, roughly, and the higher your content is scored towards that +1 to the keyword you intend, the more likely it is that Google is going to give you a higher ranking. So they're giving you through their API an available quick check between your headers, your body, your title on your intended keyword, doing kind of an ontological check. So it's essentially straight from Google, a check that is a precursor or a proxy for how you'll rank.
Yes, exactly. Abby asked, is market share relevant for sites that don't sell products? Yes, market share is still even if you're B2B, right? And maybe you're not a direct e-commerce site, even if you don't sell products directly on your site, it's still important to understand market share. It's so important to understand market share when compared to competitors because hey, maybe you have a services landing page, right? But that still drives actual revenue. So market share is basically like how much of an individual query is someone searching, and then what's a competitor's landscape within that position. You can still use that for any type of business, right? It's a really, really powerful way to actually understand like, hey, how our competitors actually faring in terms of market share with whatever type of one. So even if you were the New York Times and reporting on the presidential election, in theory, you could take a look at like, hey, for other competitors, for CNN, right? Like what's their market share in terms of their electoral content, right? And then how do we reverse engineer theirs? It's a good question.
Chris, you mind if I add something there?
No, please do.
Okay, so we also have done a lot of research on like how to break up websites into different categories, and there are search-based businesses and brand-based businesses. Search-based businesses, there's a lot of categorical search already existing in your space. It's well materialized, high volume. So you're trying to show up for those keywords. And brand-based journey, you don't always have that categorical phraseology that exists. So instead, you're trying to say, well, I know who my target markets are. I know what they think about. I know what their psychographics and their interests and their lifestyles are. So you're building content for that. And that's more like awareness oriented. It's blog articles, etc. So you've got like category pages where you're selling a product and you show up for categorical phrases. That's consideration. You've got awareness, which is one level higher, which is more lifestyle oriented. So you get to actually choose and calibrate what it means to have a market share. Like market share in what? Is it a market share within lifestyle conversations? Is it a market share within a categorical phraseology? But for 70% of businesses that are search-based journeys, they should be thinking more categorical phraseology. And the 30% of businesses that are brand-based journeys should be focused more on the lifestyle and the psychographic ontologies. So hopefully that does help it. Steering that strategy can be really helpful.
Awesome. Love it. Couple more that are some super good questions here. Tracy asked, does it make sense to compare our data with our competitor growth? And if so, why? This is a great question. I'll tell you why, because Tracy's right. It doesn't always make sense to use market share for all competitors, because if you are comparing with a competitor that has 1,000, hundreds of more products, right? They offer completely separate inventories. You don't have the exact same product crossover, and it doesn't make sense to compare within that competitor. So the advice I would give is one, try to find, if you're using market share, try to find competitors that are as close to you as possible, where it's like, hey, we largely compete for the same terms. Our inventories line up. Yes, there might be some small differences, but largely when you look across the site, they're the same. If it's harder to do, what you also can do is you can use these tools to actually drill down to like, hey, for individual sections of your site. So like, let's say you're a large travel e-commerce shop and you offer luggage. We can compare your luggage section against 3 other luggage competitors, right? And just look at those individual sections. And that might be a way you can drill down and segment your market share to a little bit more apples to apples, right? But that's a great point, right? Is like you don't want to compare against competitors where it's like, yes, we offer one product, they offer 500 products. They're obviously going to have much larger market share, right? Or conversely, though, you might say, hey, we're all competing against for the same keywords, but we have 50 pages, they have 250 pages. Well, that's probably one of the reasons their market share is so large. And then in that case, it's not a difference in products, it's a difference in content, right? And that is within your control. Cool. Another question from John here. Do you trust Ahrefs competitor data when comparing it to analytics GSC data? It can seem unreliable. That's a great question as well. I would say this with any data, even within GSC, is use it with a grain of salt, right? Data in SEO is very much a proxy. It is approximate. Ahrefs basically calculates it and basically like assuming a click-through rate curve. So like assuming you rank in a certain position and that gets a certain percentage of clicks, this is what the traffic will look like. That is how Ahrefs is backing into that number. As a reality, it's not going to exactly match like what you're seeing in GSC or other SEO tools. However, it's still a good enough proxy to back into those estimations, right? So there's no tool in SEO that's perfect. Even GSC, GA, like have differences between the two because they calculate data differently. But it's still good. It's still a good enough proxy to be able to make those measurements, or to be able to at least say, hey, these are the competitors that are winning in search, right? And we're losing in terms of search value. So even just at a baseline level of like, who should we be paying attention to? Who should we be reverse engineering their strategies? Ahrefs is more than sufficient for that.
I'll throw in one thing. Bright Edge used to like take every misspelling and pluralization and singular version, and they say like a misspelled version of a keyword is still 10,000 searches because the main keyword is, and you would get like 40 variations of misspellings for a keyword, and it would basically increase your volume by 40x. SEMrush specifically has done a really good job of trying to figure out the volume at the misspelling and variation level, and then recategorizes all of it based on intent, and intents have different click-through rates for different positions. So while I also think that the traffic estimator for SEMrush is not great, it's still a little bit better than some of the other ones out there as well. So
Cool. Yeah, a couple other questions here. Dylan asks, can you expand on the forecasting in the industry heavily influenced by macro trends? So basically, right, like how can we forecast when you're in an industry that's impacted by something like COVID, the housing market, and maybe even inflation's in there. Well, the good news is, at least with the SEO tools that you're forecasting against, is at least your rankings or visibility won't be impacted by that, right? So really what will be impacted is the search volume. And once again, I think the forecasts are going to be supposed to be a proxy or a communication tool, right? Some great advice I got was used by Daniel Russell, our CEO at Agital Go Fish. He talked about like how consulting companies use forward-looking statements, right? So if you think you're in an industry that's heavily disrupted, and you think your query volume is going to be disrupted, right? Position your forecast as a forward-looking statement, or shorten your forecast timelines, right? If you're afraid that within a year things could be completely different, shorten it up to a 3-month forecast, a 6-month forecast, and then you can continually update from there. But this, or even talk to other marketing channels and say, hey, how are you forecasting given all this change, right? But it's still necessary, especially when you're presenting to the C-suite in terms of how you can get buy-in. So I still, even though there might be a lot of market change within that, really all businesses are susceptible. A lot of businesses are susceptible to dramatic change based on COVID. I know the e-commerce industry saw heavy disruptions based on COVID one way and the other. So all industries are susceptible to it. But I would shorten up your timelines if you're worried that too long of a timeline might interrupt your forecast or make them inaccurate.
Yeah, I'll add that media mix modeling might be a really good solution as well to like broaden
Nice.
it from just SEO. We have plenty of clients who the size of the purchases are impacted because of interest rates, because the people buying need to actually take out a loan to buy what they're buying. So when you're forming the inputs for your media mix model, like where you have ad spend, you would probably want to have 2 years of ad spend by channel. But you want to have revenue separated. You want to have any influencer moment or anything that is peppered in there. And you also want to run interest rates into your multiple regression. If you can do that, then you can basically distill the correlation between interest rates and interest rate changes, and your projections. From there, if you really want to go further, you can use CD returns for 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months to predict what the changes in interest rates are going to be in the upcoming 3, 6, 12. And then you can forge your forecast off of that. But it would be a company-wide forecast as opposed to an SEO forecast. I don't think we've done that for just SEO, but for media mix models, interest rates, COVID trends, et cetera, are a big part of that calculation.
Cool. Do we still have time for more questions, Nick?
Yeah, I'll just ask in the chat box. I mean, until you guys start leaving, we can keep answering questions,
Cool.
but answer the ones you feel good about. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. So Zach asked, do you find these strategies have increased the success rate for getting buy-in for a meaningful way with our clients? Yes, for sure. Couple of things that has helped us get more buy-in. One, talking about things in terms of growth initiatives, right? Just that simple fact, right? Talking about things in terms of growth, revenue, profitability, actually not being afraid to put numbers, things can really help contextualize. Because if you tell someone with not a lot of experience in SEO that, hey, we're going to help increase your organic traffic, well, it's unclear what that means for them, right? So to actually put it in financial numbers where it's like, hey, we're going to increase we're going to use traffic by this much, order value by this much, convert like this, based on your conversion rate, that's what's going to happen, or we forecast is going to happen. It's very, very powerful to be able to do. Another good way to think about it, and we didn't touch on this, was thinking about things in terms of an opportunity cost, right? That's another good way to get buy-in from clients, C-suite, right? Like, hey, our competitor has built out a robust content library of 4,000 new pages. Well, by getting this much market share, there's been an opportunity cost to us because we're not able to keep pace, right? And if we had a similar content program, we would have been able to realize a lot of the revenue from that content. So opportunity cost is another really, really powerful way to be able to get buy-in and a way to frame your recommendations. Once again, tying that opportunity cost back to realized revenue. But that's another really powerful way to kind of get buy-in is thinking about things in terms of what was the opportunity cost of not doing that initiative? Because even if things were standstill and things didn't grow, if they didn't grow as fast as they should have, that's still a net loss for the business and still a net loss in terms of revenue and an unrealized opportunity.
Chris, do you often find people who've gone like they have a website, they did a change, like redesign or something, and it dropped, and you're like, well, if we just get it back to what it used to be, why don't you take a look at your numbers back then? If you want to know what the opportunity cost is, just look at how much you've lost as a result. If we get you back there, that's already it's real. It was impacting your business and it stopped because you messed up something.
Absolutely, yeah, and and then the case becomes you can use your own internal data to kind of really come across that, right? Especially if you've seen drops where it's like, hey, we haven't invested, like another good case of like we haven't invested in SEO, and then over time we've seen steady drops because competitors who have invested up, they're realizing the big twins. Well, now we can go and back into, well, hey, back in 2018 when your SEO was strong, even when you weren't paying attention to it. Now we can go back and say, hey, well, what's been the loss of revenue during that time? Well, that's been revenue that you could have been realizing all along from the organic channel.
And it was usually on someone's watch that is no longer there. So it's not, um,
Cool.
really nice note about you, Chris, from Edwin. Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, a couple more questions here. Is an increase in brand number of pages actually a reflection of the increased content library? Yes, in general, that is a reflection of the increase in content library. Content library is another way of saying how many content assets do we own? So, quote unquote, industry indexable pages would be a reflection of that. And then, yeah, I think we got through most of these. I guess I'll answer the last one from Bill here. Can Ahrefs do a decent TAM report? And yes, that is the market share report that we showed earlier. That is the organic competitors report. Is that individual TAM report? Once again, it's a proxy, right? It's never ever going to 100% reflect what the actual data is, but it is a proxy to be able to understand how much organic opportunity is there. What is our total addressable market in terms of search? So yes, the Ahrefs organic competitors report or similar SEM reports can act as a proxy for that. Yep, no problem.
This was phenomenal. So much wisdom and insight on this. And what a great audience, too. Thanks, guys, for being so engaged. And for all the people who said reach out. There's going to be a lot more. We're going to get a lot of one-on-one time with Chris after this. So thank you, folks, for taking some time out on a Wednesday. Thank you, Chris, for putting together such an awesome piece of content. Hope we do a lot more of these. And yeah, hope everyone enjoys the rest of their week.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.